All right, I want to say good evening. Welcome to our Wake County Board of Education public meeting. It's December 15th. It is 5:42, so I will call this meeting to order at that time. We have a quorum. Everyone is here and present. All board members, along with Superintendent Moore. The rest are virtual, but all board members and the superintendent is here. So if you will at this time stand with me and we'll say the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, well, let's jump right in tonight. We'll start with our information and comments from Superintendent. Superintendent Moore.
Good evening. On Tuesday last week, I had the honor of traveling throughout the district to safely surprise and recognize our 10 Teacher of the Year finalists. We announced our 20 semifinalists last February, and these teachers have been patiently waiting nearly 10 months to learn who would advance to the top 10. I know you will join me in congratulating the following 2020-21 Teacher of the Year finalists: Gregory Iman, Brentwood Magnet Elementary; Robin Giberson, Buckhorn Creek Elementary; Sean Hines, Mount Vernon Middle; Kimberly Holland, Oakview Elementary; Victoria Lightfoot, Cedar Fork Elementary; Kelly O'Hare, Olive Chapel Elementary; Jennifer Pride, Heritage Middle; Aaron Steele, Nightdale High; Bethany Wilcox, Leesville Road Middle; Bria Wright, Hortons Creek Elementary. We look forward to naming a winner during a virtual event on February 11th. More details about this special celebration will be shared soon. Congratulations again to these outstanding educators. Next, I'd like to congratulate 2 excellent school administrators who recently have received regional and state honors. Dr. Elena Ashburn of Broughton High School, our current Principal of the Year, has been named 2021 Regional Principal of the Year for the North Central region of North Carolina by the Department of Public Instruction, and now is a finalist for State Principal of the Year. I had the pleasure of joining with board member Kushner and others for a surprise, socially distanced celebration with some of her staff at the school's gym yesterday. Dr. Ashburn, who has been the principal at Broughton since 2017, is now one of the 8 finalists for the title of North Carolina Principal of the Year, which will be announced in spring 2021. As I told her during the ceremony and those who were in attendance, this honor is not only an affirmation of her exceptional leadership, but also of the entire school community that supports her. The same can be said for Hilda de Leon, Assistant Principal of Hodge Road Magnet Elementary, who last week was named the 2021 North Carolina Outstanding Elementary Assistant Principal of the Year. This award, presented by the North Carolina Principals and Assistant Principals Association, serves as a way to recognize the dedication and success of assistant principals working in pre-K through 8 schools. Hilda will serve as North Carolina's representative for the National Association of Elementary Schools Outstanding Assistant Principal of the Year program, which recognizes outstanding elementary and middle school assistant principals who have demonstrated success in leadership, curriculum, and personalization. I am beyond proud to know that we have this caliber of principal and assistant principals in our district. Congratulations to both Dr. Ashburn and Ms. De Leon on these well-deserved honors. At our last meeting, I shared with you details about the money raised by our Central Services staff to support the Food Bank of Central and Eastern North Carolina. This evening, I'm pleased to share another example of our employees' generosity. A little more than halfway through our annual United Way campaign, our employees have already pledged more than $50,000 to this worthy cause. We all understand the pandemic has taken a toll on so many in our community, and the United Way is well suited to assist nonprofits that are making a difference. They are truly committed to helping Triangle residents through this crisis, and I'm grateful to our employees for their willingness to help. The campaign concludes Friday, and I encourage all employees who feel they are able to please participate. Lastly, as we meet for the last time in 2020, I would like to offer another word of heartfelt thanks to our students, parents, teachers, and staff for continuing to persevere through this unprecedented crisis. This pandemic has tested us at every level, and we know many more challenges lay in store. This has been hard for all of us. It's why I stand amazed and grateful for the effort and resolve demonstrated by our entire community. Thank you to our teachers for the creativity and care they have shown in adapting to this new landscape. Thank you to our students for learning new skills and demonstrating the grit and flexibility we hope will only benefit you down the road. Thank you to our parents and caregivers for your patience, understanding, and utterly invaluable support of your students' learning. Thank you to our school administrators for their steady and essential leadership. And thank you to all of our school support staff, our bus drivers, custodians, child nutrition workers, technology support specialists, counselors, and all others who have ensured we operate as smoothly as possible. As we look to the new year, I have hope not only that we will begin to free ourselves from the grip of this pandemic, but also that the many lessons we have learned in the past 10 months will make us a stronger school district moving forward. Once again, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. That concludes my comments.
Thank you, Superintendent Moore, and thank you for that heartfelt thank you and extension of appreciation to our staff and all those that are part of the Wake County Public School family. Just a couple of comments, as I shared my commentary earlier in the work session, but I do want to again congratulate our Teacher of the Year finalists, all 10 of them. Also, Principal Ashburn and Assistant Principal De Leon, thank you for your hard work and tireless dedication to your school communities. I also want to thank all of, again, the Wake County Public School family for their recent contributions and support of the food bank, as you just heard, the United Way, and also the American Cancer Society, and our Wake County Turns Pink campaign last week, most recently. Again, just continue to be amazed at the big heart and willingness to give and support, even in these tough pandemic times, and so that is greatly appreciated. And lastly, I just wanted to share a pep talk, if you will. I had the idea of sharing a video, but because the video is copyrighted and not allowed to be able to be live streamed, I would encourage all of you to just Google Kid Superintendent. And if you have an opportunity, it's about a 3-minute video that's called Kid Superintendent. And as you know, you heard our discussion in the work session, and just sort of encouraging us to keep our heads up, keep plowing, and again, in spite of the COVID the pandemic fatigue. But if you have an opportunity, I think you'll really get a kick out of this cool little video. But it's just Google Kid Superintendent. It was my hope to share that with you during this time, but again, unable to. But anyway, if you have a minute, take a look at that. So with that, I'll turn it over to Vice Chairman Haffey. Any comments?
Thank you, Chair Sutton. I'd also like to extend my congratulations to the Teacher of the Year finalists, and thank all of our employees and staff for the work that they have done this semester in getting our kids back into the building and getting devices passed out, in keeping our kids engaged in a virtual space. It has been a lot. And we have a 2-week or full track out coming up for our students and our staff. And I hope that you all are able to use this winter break to unplug, relax, recharge, and be refreshed as we return back to school in January. Thank you.
All right, we'll stay here at the table and then go around. Mr. Haggerty.
All right, thank you.
You've been last, so we'll let you go first this time.
I appreciate that, Chairman Sutton. Again, I would extend all of my thanks and best wishes to everyone, no matter what holiday you celebrate coming up here. This will be our last meeting of the year, official board meeting for the year, and I hope everyone looks forward to spending a little bit of time in their own personal ways. I will tell a quick story about a great experience I had visiting York Elementary last week. York Elementary is participating in a program that is offered in partnership with the United Arts Council for Artists in Schools. And so even in these challenging times, they were able to do a school art project where what they did, they had over 200 K-5 students each receive their own tile, their own art palette, their paints, and then each of the kids were able to log in, get their lessons, watch the instructional video, and every kid was able to do a personalized tile that when they sent back in to the artists, Anna Podris and Keith Norville, they were able to assemble all of them into York Elementary's familiar mascot, the bulldog. And so Principal Williams had a wonderful event where the families could come through, drive through, stop, get out of the car if they wanted to visit, and then see their completed work. And it was great to see each of the kids that had just sent in the one mural find their contribution on that one big picture. And it was a good way for everyone to come together and sort of see some classmates and everything again. So just a wonderful program. It's something that a lot of people may or may not be aware of, but I wanted to share it. Thank you. And again, just also express thanks to the teachers, the parents, the staff, the families, everyone who's been in contact with us as we work through these hard issues. We appreciate your input and your feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hagerty. Thank you for sharing that story. Mrs. Carter.
All right. Well, over the past week, I've had the opportunity to visit multiple schools. I really want to thank the administration and staff. I know times are super busy right now. At Connections Academy, Salem Elementary, Salem Middle, Reedy Creek Middle, Briarcliff Elementary, Kingswood Elementary, Northwoods Elementary, where I started at Wake County, Cary Elementary, and Adams Elementary. As I visited the classrooms and I met staff and students there, I was quickly reminded of why we are all here: the education of every student. I witnessed staff working with unmasked students every day, that they are showing up and they are doing that. I witnessed classrooms with way too many snakes in them for me to stay in for too long. I saw Letterland bingo, which I thought was awesome. Art classes outside. Ukulele wall, which threw me. That was pretty awesome. Kids playing triangle, the triangle. And this? Okay. So maybe shouldn't be my favorite, but kind of was. I saw a student look around and kind of see if we were watching and then took off running down the hallway. Not far. He was safe. But I was like, they're still elementary students, right? And so it was interesting to walk through and see that and meet and see so many wonderful things happening. And it's really just a reminder, whether it was the pre-K classes with students just beginning with us, or what it was explained to me as kind of like a last second chance at the Connections Academy, and just the impact that the staff are still having on these kids when they're coming in the building, despite of a pandemic, despite if a kid has, a reason for not being able to wear a mask, whatever it may be. And I just want to say thank you to all of those staff, whether it's the teachers, administrators, data managers, IAs, cafeteria staff, and just reorganizing if there's people out, and people just jumping and saying, okay, I'll do it. Thank you. And thank you, because the impact on these students it's powerful and priceless. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Carter. Mrs. Cash.
I also would like to thank everybody in Wake County. I'm not going to go through all the different entities, but everybody in Wake County and then the Wake County school system for working so hard. We don't take any of that for granted. And happy holidays, Merry Christmas to everybody. And I do, as Ms. Mahaffey said, I hope everybody takes a little time to not work too hard, be on computers, not computers. We shouldn't be on those right now. And during this break anyhow, so I appreciate all that. I would also like to say thank you to the people that have been emailing on both sides of our topics. And I know it's a tough issue, and it's we have seen some really amazing videos of our schools, and we've seen some amazing videos of kids in their cars waving to their classmates in elementary schools, and we've seen kids that couldn't wait to get back to school. So I appreciate the happiness that we can give to children when they come into a schoolhouse, whether it's one day or 30 days, whatever, but every time they come in and they can smile like they do, it warms my heart. I also want to say that I hope that we continue, as we talked last night, very much about the fact that we have to think of different ways to handle this in our schools. And I believe our community is ready to work with us, as they always have been. And I think we are very ready to open our arms and have them help staff our schools or whatever they need to do, help some funding if that's the case, to get staff into our schools. And so we are going to, I think, work hard to be creative with our partners in this community, because we have a great community. I hope that as our schools, I hope that we as Wake County Public Schools uplift people that are creative and aren't just following the rules, and those that are thinking in a creative way. And sometimes we may uplift the people that are following the rules best, but I don't think that's what we need necessarily right now. And I'm not talking about the safety or the COVID rules. We do have to follow those. But if you have creative ideas in your school, I hope that we take those and we run with them and show other people. And then I just want to say that I appreciate my board members. I think everybody in this room is struggling with what we can do to help our teachers and our leaders and our children and parents. And there's not one board member that I've seen that has taken that lightly. And I want to thank my colleagues for being just really, really emotionally involved in this. So thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Cash. Ms. Kushner.
Good evening. Thank you, Chair Sutton. And I will add my accolades to our staff, to central office leadership, to our educators in every single school, as well as our students for their incredible work and for their generosity of spirit, as Chair Sutton said. So especially to Wake NCAE, which hosted a really great town hall for those of us who were able to attend, and really laying out their authentic stories about what is working, how students are excited to be back in school, and other students are forming wonderful relationships with their teachers online through Virtual Academy, the asynchronous days, which I noted in the work session. So there are a lot of great things going on in Wake County, a lot of success stories that we can learn from, and also raising concerns that I think we also talked about at the work session. And it was exciting to be at Broughton yesterday with, as Superintendent Moore outlined, the exciting celebration of Dr. Ashburn. She is well-deserved, and she well-deservingly lifted up her Broughton community. Those CAPS take everything very seriously. It's a fantastic school community, and they are fired up and ready to go to start January 20th with their students coming back. And on a more somber note, I couldn't let today pass without noting yesterday was the 8-year anniversary of the Sandy Hook shooting, and it's way past time to have sound gun rules that protect our children. And you would think that 8 years ago this nation would have woken up to that fact. So I continue to hold those children in my heart, and and hope that we will give that as a nation serious consideration to protect our school children. And going forward, I think to echo Ms. Cash, this board cares deeply about our next steps. We're going to have serious conversations and continue these conversations so that we can expand learning for our students at whatever level they need in the coming year, because these times demand it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Kushner. Ms. Johnson-Hosler.
Thank you very much, and I will start by, again, the season for gratitude as we move into our winter break and holidays, and I certainly hope everybody really does take the time to take care of themselves and do something that you wouldn't normally do for yourself, and that's for adults and our young people alike. And so I certainly hope people really do take the time and refresh and rejuvenate and come back ready for January. First, I'd like to give a couple of shout-outs, and I will start with Ms. Mahaffey and I shared school because she let me know she forgot to mention this. But many of our schools are doing a great job. Dance programs are happening during the holidays, band concerts. But we both are excited that Fuquay-Varina High School is presenting the virtual A Christmas Carol. So please check it out on their website. I just pulled it up to make sure anybody can find it here. But again, the level of creativity that our schools are coming up with. And again, this is an example of extra or co-curricular activities of being able to bring our students into the building to prepare, to actually still do something very virtual for our community. So many of our schools are doing that, and so please, for those of us in this room and those who are listening and watching, please support our young people as they use their creativity to still bring holiday spirit to our community. I have a huge shout out, and some of you certainly know the people that I'm going to give credit to. When I did my walkthrough at Fuquay-Varina Middle School, they had done a ton of cleanup, and they bought this spirit rock, and it was very little. And I was like, "You're gonna paint that?" Needless to say, I was doing election season, and Representative Sidney Betch said, "I know somebody who can help you." Well, lo and behold, it was Tom Oxholm, who she didn't make the connection that he used to be on the school board until she connected us by email. But he so graciously immediately responded, and Wake Stone donated a 7.5-ton spirit rock with a simple email of saying, "Can you please help my middle school with a spirit rock?" And they did. So thank you very much to former board member Tom Oxholm, who, when I tell you, he immediately responded as soon as I said, "I just want to give the middle school a spirit rock because the middle schoolers are coming back." And we heard on Friday, Lindsay and I, in our Fuquay Chamber Education meeting, that they were getting really excited about how they're going to decorate this spirit rock. So again, a quick ask to our community. They certainly do rise to the occasion. And likewise, we had Austin Elroy from ARCCS, Lawn and Maintenance and Landscaping, deliver the rock. So there was no cost to the school because they had spent the money on this first rock, which I don't paint, but I was like, I think you're only going to need one person to paint that. And they wanted it to be a group project. So again, thank you to the community for answering what was a small ask that yielded big results for Fuquay-Varina Middle School. So I certainly appreciate when our community, all you got to do is say we got a problem, and clearly, as Ms. Cash often says, our community will come to our rescue, up to 7.5 tons. I also want to thank our staff, and we've talked about how great and grateful we are for them. And I always ask Paul Coe a million questions, as you all know. Social and emotional is where I live most of the time. And I certainly want to give him a ton of shout out because I don't think I would have known he was disengaged, with the exception of Thomas Ray from Post Center in 4-H said to me, Paul Coe was very instrumental in continuing the work at Pine Acres in Fuquay that I'd completely been very engaged with over the summer, but now that we're back up and running, I didn't realize they were still full-fledged. They're still doing giveaways. They did a huge Thanksgiving giveaway and did another huge giveaway this weekend. They are planning COVID testing, and so I hear, Mr. Coe, that you have been very instrumental co-chairing, making sure these things still happen in the Fuquay community, and specifically near one of our older communities in Fuquay, near Lincoln Heights and Pine Acres. So again, thank our staff for the tireless and unseen work that they certainly are doing in community that as a board, we don't always know their level of engagement. So I also appreciated the community sharing with me how much time and it was clearly illustrated. He puts in a lot of time with this group in Fuquay. So again, thank you, Paul Coe, for your support and the work of Pine Acres Community Center, who's also, if you're giving and need a tax write-off, they are a community-based organization. They're not a part of Parks and Rec. They have zero funding. They're community-run. So if you need somebody to give a little holiday cheer for, I certainly recommend Pine Acres Community Center. They opened up computer stations when we went back on remote, so students could come in and do homework and gather. They have a new outside garden. So clearly they tried to create a space for our young people in the Fuquay area while they're not fully reintegrated into being with their peers during this time. So they certainly have done yeoman's work. And the last thing I will note is we talk about Lincoln Heights all the time. Some of you certainly hear Ms. Mahaffey and I talk about it a lot. So Annette Steele, who was actually awarded Outstanding Educator Award from the Entomology Society, and we're extremely happy because, again, for me, the thing that I said to the principal is this is certainly a new magnet, and this is how you do magnet well. So thank you to Ms. Still and the entire Lincoln Heights community who've really, really instituted and innovated in Fuquay with this magnet theme. Thank you.
And she's still looking for somebody to babysit the tarantula over winter break.
Yeah.
I set them out.
Yeah, that's a hard no.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson-Hostler. Dr. Martin.
Thank you. As always, I want to begin by saying thank you. Thank you to all of our teachers, to our staff, to administration, students, parents, the entire community. As others have said, we're in this together, and working together is the only way that we can come out the other side. But particularly to our staff, teachers, administration, you're doing really heavy lifts in your schools. As we learned yesterday, I want to give a special shout out and thank you to our substitutes, because while our fill rate seems low, the reality is we're having twice the number of subs responding to the needs this week than we did a month ago. So there's needs are high, but thank you to the 350 subs who are daily coming into our schools. Again, thank you. I do want to acknowledge, having read all the emails that come through, the volume is such that, I'm sorry we can't, I don't think much of any of us can reply to all of them. But, again, whether whichever perspective, we value the input. And I have read all the ones that came in as of midnight last night. And we'll read the rest tonight. Finally, I'd just like to, again, extend holiday greetings, whatever holidays you celebrate over the next, either have or will be over the next few weeks. I wish you blessed holidays. Stay safe, find some rest, find some refreshment. In staying safe, let's all just remember that what we do is going to impact our ability to come back in the new year. Whatever we do now impacts our future, so please stay safe. Help us make sure we can get off to a good and solid and healthy start of the second semester. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. And Mrs. Scott.
Thank you and good evening. I want to give a shout out to the schools that have been bringing back their students for testing this week. It's been heartwarming to see how much these teachers have missed their students, and certainly understand the mixed feelings that accompany all of this. But I do want to thank them for their flexibility and for their dedication to serving our students. And also wanted to offer congratulations to Ms. Pride from Heritage Middle School and Mr. Steele from Knightdale High School. I've had the pleasure of talking and observing both of these educators in different opportunities, and had a really touching moment. I don't even know if Ms. Pride knew that I was sort of watching, but when Heritage Middle School brought the talk by Sunny Cali, which I know many of my colleagues have seen, She had a really touching moment with her own family. So she is incredibly dedicated to serving all students, all of her students, and also so incredibly dedicated to her family as well. And Mr. Steele, I know I've said this before, he brings such a bright light to all of his students and to his colleagues as well. And even noticed a former student reaching out to talk about the influence that he had on this person. So we're really lucky to have these amazing educators throughout all of the Wake County Public School system. We choose one teacher of the year each year, but all of our educators are just outstanding, and everything they've been bringing to their students is so appreciated now and always, of course. Our family engagement has definitely taken a different look. Our community engagement, our Title I coordinators are very familiar with already trying to find new and creative ways of making sure that we're reaching out to our families, and also understanding that engagement doesn't always look like a parent sitting in front of you at a parent-teacher conference or answering your emails immediately or picking up the phone. And there are different ways to see, are our families engaged with their students? Do they feel like they're a part of the community? And I just wanted at every school in District 1, there are 28. I could list the ways they've been going above and beyond, but I just wanted to point out and say a special thank you to Lockhart Elementary. They've been honoring their students of the week with going to homes of students who are virtual or hybrid at their homes, and also extending that to students in school. And I think that's just fantastic to see that public just going out. And Zebulon Elementary School, they have had 2 community engagement events, SAFE. They've been doing, they really work on trying to make sure they're reaching out to all their community, that the community and the families who attend the school, and they really try to bridge that connection. Our Eastern schools, they're a tight-knit community, and they do depend on the support in their schools, so they've been doing a great job. And Zebulon Middle School as well, on their social media, has been putting these sort of shout-outs and having quotes from teachers and staff members and parents that just talk about what the school means to them, and just it's been outstanding. And I just want to applaud schools, because right now just day-to-day instruction is challenging enough, and to see them going above and beyond to continue the importance of reaching out to people in a safe way. And to close my statements, that's what I hope we all can do, is continue to extend our gratitude to each other during this holiday season at the close of one heck of a year, and refresh. And I do wish everyone who's listening happy holidays, and thank you for all that you're doing.
Thank you, Mrs. Scott, and all board members again for your comments this evening. Moving back to our agenda, or staying on agenda, before I ask for an approval of tonight's meeting agenda, I do want to add an action item, that item being a proposal to move to remote instruction from January the 4th through the 15th. Staff presented on yesterday an update and proposal to the board at the work session, and reviewed several considerations that are informing this possible decision. And so staff is proposing a pause to in-person instruction for those dates. So with that amended agenda, amendment to the agenda, can I ask for a motion to approve tonight's agenda with the said amendment?
Motion to approve the agenda with the said amendment.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Motion from Ms. Johnson-Hoster, second by Mrs. Cash, to approve tonight's agenda as amended. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor show by a sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Tonight's agenda is approved as amended. Moving to public comment tonight. Residents wishing to address the Wake County Board of Education may submit their comments or video by noon the day of the meeting. That link can be found at www.wcpss.net. Due to capacity restrictions during the current COVID-19 pandemic, public comments are being accepted only in writing or by posting a video using the instructions on the website. The following citizens have submitted comments as part of our public comment portion of the agenda. Again, their comments are linked on the same online agenda we're using for tonight's meeting. That agenda, as well as guidelines for those wishing to submit comments for future meetings, again, can be found on our website, www.wcpss.net, under the tab labeled School Board. We have 104 written comments from members of the public. The topics and speakers whose comments are attached to the agenda are as follows. I'm not going to read all 104 names, but there are 67 speakers who wish to speak on remote versus in-person instruction. There are 5 that wish to speak on policies regarding gender identity and transgender students. There are 10 that wish to speak or submitted comments on in-person instruction and first semester. There are 5 on teacher safety, 4 on the student achievement meeting on November 23rd, 2020. And then there are 13 on other various topics, including race relations in high school, Title IX representative at local school site, skewed COVID-19 cases in schools, ECATs and medical information, calendar for spring 2021, board advisory committee meeting, creative solutions to staffing double standard regarding COVID-19, COVID cases, athletic teams. WCPSS is on the wrong track in finding solutions to the SRO policing issue, lack of math resources, fund school peace builders, and a video on DECA. So that represents our 104 written comments for tonight's meeting. Again, please take a look and govern yourselves accordingly. We have one information item, and that is our usual and customary reopening updates coming from the superintendent. So it's typically a brief summary on the reopening updates planned given during our work session. So Superintendent Moore, turn over to you.
Thank you, Chair Sutton. And yes, as a customary update, review of the highlights of the work session for those who are joining us for just the Board of Education meeting. There were 3 items that were part of the update this afternoon from staff. The first update concerned efforts that the district is undertaking to add some resources and people to support contact tracing and case investigation efforts in the district. We are adding 13 positions to increase and or support our collaboration with Wake County Health and Human Services for contact tracing and case investigation, as well as some data management. So that is an update that we brought you today. The second item of update in the work session involved our virtual academy numbers and where we are with the number of students in elementary, middle, and high who have now made decisions. The families have made decisions for what they are interested in for second semester. Overall, we see there are a few more students that seem to be choosing in-person learning, but not by large numbers. I think it's 85,000 that we saw first semester to 77,000 second semester that will be in virtual academy, so that is still a very large number. And there's still perhaps a little bit of cleanup that needs to be done at the elementary level, but looks like that the numbers will be fairly parallel to what they were first semester. The last part of the update included some calendar updates for the board, in particular an update related to an item that you have on the agenda this evening to revise the multi-track year-round calendar that is operating on a single track 4 calendar this year. The revision was proposed last week and discussed to change the last track out period of the year in order to add an additional week of time that supports providing in particular those families who are on track 1 that would need to return on a proposed regular 4-track calendar beginning July 2021, additional time for a break prior to returning in track 1 at the beginning of July. And then a second piece of data related to the calendar updates was that it does look like at this time that based on the number of families across our schools, our year-round schools that have chosen to remain on virtual academy or start virtual academy for second semester, that all of our multi-track year-round schools will be able to stay on that single track 4 calendar for the remainder of this year. And if there are any changes to that, we would notify the board at the next board meeting, but we're pretty confident at this point that we're good there. And those are my updates.
All right. Thank you, Superintendent Moore, for those reopening updates. At this time, if I can entertain a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda.
Motion to approve the consent agenda?
Second.
Got a motion from Ms. Mahaffey and a second from Ms. Johnson-Hostler to approve tonight's consent agenda. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor show by sign of aye. Any opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Tonight's consent agenda is approved. That takes us down to our action items for this evening. We've got a few policies and also an item from our chief of schools. Starting with our policy items. First one up is board policy 1610-7800 on professional learning on its first reading. Dr. Gardner.
Good evening, Chair, members of the board, and Superintendent Moore. Tonight, for the professional learning policy revision, I invite Emily Mountford, Senior Director in our Office of Professional Learning, to present to you the policy revision and the request we are making of the board. Mrs. Mountford.
Thank you, Dr. Gardner. Chair Sutton, Superintendent Moore, and members of the board. Good evening, and thank you for having me. I'm here to present to you the first reading of Policy 1610, Professional Learning. Board Policy 1610, Professional Learning, is a revised policy. The revisions reflect changes in Wake County Public School System practice and philosophy regarding professional learning, as well as updates made by the North Carolina School Boards Association. The policy was reviewed at the November 24th, 2020 Policy Committee meeting. As we discussed at the Policy Committee meeting, we have removed a small paragraph regarding staff orientation from the policy. Per discussions with Dr. Matillo in Human Resources and with our attorneys, the staff orientation will be placed in Policy 7100, Recruitment and Selection of Personnel. You will see that language when that policy is further revised in the next few months. We request the board's approval on first reading of Policy 1610, Professional Learning. Thank you.
Ms. Kushner.
Thank you, Chair Sutton. On behalf of the Policy Committee, I move approval of the revision to Policy 1610, Professional Learning, as described by Ms. Montford, and to continue our wonderful traditions here in Wake County in our professional learning. Thank you.
Second.
Got a motion from Ms. Kushner, second from Mr. Hagerty to accept board staff approval recommendation for board policy 1610-7800. Is there any discussion?
Just on first reading, that's Jonathan.
Thank you, sir. That's on its first reading. Hearing no discussion or further discussion, all those in favor show by sign of aye. Any opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Board Policy 1610-7800, Professional Learning, is approved on its first reading. Thank you, Dr. Garner and Ms. Montford.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our second policy for the evening, so Dr. Gardner, you're staying with us, Board Policy 1710, and that is on the prohibition against discrimination, harassment, and bullying. This is also coming to us on its first reading.
Mr. Sutton, I am staying with you, and thank you. I am here to present to you Board Policy 1710, which is prohibition against discrimination, harassment, and bullying. And we are presenting to you for request for approval for first reading. This particular policy revision reflects recent major court decisions that relate to the rights of transgender employees and students. This policy revision was presented at the November 24th Policy Committee meeting. And if and when you give approval to it tonight, it will replace our current policy 1710, prohibition against discrimination, harassment, and bullying. We respectfully ask for the board's approval on first reading.
Mrs. Kushner.
Thank you, Chair Sutton. With that, I move approval of the revisions to Policy 1710, Prohibition Against Discrimination, Harassment, and Bullying.
Second.
Got a motion from Ms. Kushner and a second from Mr. Hegarty to approve Board Policy 1710 on this prohibition against discrimination, harassment, and bullying. Is there any discussion? Ms. Kushner.
Thank you, Chair Sutton. And I just wanted to be clear to the community that this revision inserts one word, transgender, and the phrase is transgender or gender identity, so that we expand, based on court decisions, protections for students prohibiting against discrimination, harassment, and bullying. The rest of the policy is exactly the same, focused on discrimination, harassment, and bullying, and prohibitions on that being included as a protected group. And that's simply what this policy does. Thank you.
With that, let me, Mr. Blumberg, could you give us some perspective on the recent major court decisions? We've seen quite a few emails. I think there were also about 5 or 6 comments, written comments submitted for public comment about this. There seems to be, I think, a bit of confusion, perhaps. So can you talk a little bit about the genesis of this, given those recent major court decisions, and provide some clarity to the community regarding this policy?
We have to. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. These are not just any regular court decisions. You know, court decisions can be at the lower level and take some time to actually reach a final sort of national decision. These are major federal court decisions. The decision that now protects transgender individuals from employment discrimination is a United States Supreme Court decision that has ruled under federal law an employee that identifies as transgender is now protected from discrimination. Similarly, there is a Fourth Circuit decision, which is the highest court that covers North Carolina, highest federal court that covers North Carolina other than the United States Supreme Court, that provides protection against discrimination for a student who identifies as transgender. So these are very high-level, definitive court decisions that are based on federal law that provide anti-discrimination protections for a employee that identifies as transgender or a student that identifies as transgender. And those are the changes to the policy, other than literally adding legal references in support of those changes.
Thank you, sir, for that clarification. Ms. Cash, I think I saw your hand, and then Ms. Carter coming in.
I think, well, there were a lot of comments and emails and things, and I was hoping that, and I understand now that Jonathan, Mr. Bloomberg was talking about that, so that helped.
Okay. Ms. Carter?
Yeah, I was just wanting to thank Ms. Kushner for bringing that up and the clarification of that, because I think there's a lot of miscommunication happening out there. So that was very helpful. And I just want to say that this policy goes a step further to make sure that we are inclusive of all students, and making sure not only students but staff, and making sure that we're doing what we can to protect them from any type of bullying, whether it's cyberbullying and the in-person bullying, any of that, harassment. So I just want to make that very clear. And thank you for the work on this.
All right. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, and again, this is a motion to approve Board Policy 1710 on prohibition against discrimination, harassment, and bullying. All those in favor show by sign of aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Board Policy 1710 is approved on its first reading. And then our last policy is Board Policy 7100 on recruitment and selection of personnel, being brought to us on its first reading. Dr. Gardner.
Thank you, Mr. Sutton. This policy comes to you for similar reasons with regard to its revision. The revisions reflect the current major court decisions, as Mr. Blumberg has just outlined for you, the board, and the public. It reflects those rights of transgender employees and students in this particular policy related to recruitment and selection of personnel. This policy revision was presented at the November the 24th Policy Committee meeting, and if and when you give board approval tonight, it replaces the current policy 7100. So we respectively request from the board approval for policy 7100 for first reading.
Mrs. Kushner.
Thank you, Chair Sutton, and I move approval of the revisions of policy 7100, recruitment and selection of personnel, for first reading.
Second.
I finally said that.
Got a motion to approve from Mrs. Kushner and a second from Mrs. Mahaffey. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor show by sign of aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Board Policy 7100 on recruitment and selection of personnel is approved on its first reading.
Thank you, Mr. Sutton and the board.
Thank you, Dr. Gardner. Our next action item is the 2020-2021 instruction calendars for single track 4 year-round calendar that is being brought to us by, again, Wade Martin. So we'll turn it over to you. You've been busy this evening.
Good evening again, Chair Sutton, Superintendent Moore, and members of the board. As Board Chair Sutton mentioned, tonight I bring the proposed revision from our calendar committee for the semester 2 single track 4 year-round calendar. As we discussed earlier in the work session, at the November 17th work session, staff shared with the board and the public the proposed calendars for the 21-22 instructional year. During that work session, staff was tasked to see if there was a possible solution to the problem for our track 1 students, families, and staff, that they would only have a very short, just about 1 week or less than 1 week summer break in the transition from this current school year to the 21-22 school year. Our multi-track schools, as Superintendent Moore mentioned earlier in her information update, they're currently following our single track 4 calendar, which ends on June 29th. And our multi-track year-round schools are scheduled to begin next school year on July 8th. The details of the revised calendar were shared during the November 17th work session, again on the December 1st work session, and earlier today in the work session. That would allow our track 1 families and staff to have just about a 2-week summer break prior to the start of the new school year. And all of that, again, is recognizing that there are still many questions ahead about what the opening of 21-22 will look like. The revised proposed calendar meets all of the legal requirements of our current year-round calendar law, and at this time, I respectfully request board approval for the revised semester 2 single track 4 year-round calendar. Thank you.
Mrs. Mahaffey.
Chair Sutton, I make a motion to approve the changes to the 2020-2021 instructional calendars for single track 4 year-round schools.
Second.
Got a motion from Ms. Mahaffey and a second by Ms. Johnson-Hostler to approve the changes for the 2021 instruction calendars for single track 4 year-round. Is there any discussion? Ms. Mahaffey.
This is another calendar change for our year-round families, but I think this is overall a welcome change so that families as well as staff will have time between the academic year to take a moment, breathe, reset before going back into the important work that we do in our schools. So thank you to staff for looking into this.
Is there any further discussion? Seeing or hearing none, all those in favor of the proposed changes for the 2020-2021 instructional calendar show by sign of aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Ayes have it. Request for the change to those calendars is approved.
Thank you all for your time this evening.
Thank you, sir. Moving to our last item on the action agenda is the proposal to move to remote instruction from January 4th through the 15th. That is being presented by Superintendent Moore. So, Superintendent Moore, I'll turn it over to you.
Good evening again. As you were aware, yesterday we had a special called board work session to discuss a staff proposal to move the district to remote learning from January 4th through January 15th. We framed the discussion around that request in the 3 different areas that staff has been following and monitoring, and message that we would be continuing to keep an eye on as we move forward through the pandemic. That included any new or additional information or executive orders that came out of the governor's office or North Carolina DHHS, our continued collaborations and learnings with state and local health officials, as well as the ABC Science Collaborative, and then monitoring the implementation of our district's current plan and programming. We did invite Dr. Benjamin to come yesterday instead of today so that he could help us and work through some of the things that he is looking at from his end with regards to the implementation of both Plan B and Plan A across the state of North Carolina, and updated guidance that's coming out of CDC and their information that they are sharing. So after the work session yesterday, we talked about the different kinds of things that the district is having some difficulty and challenges with, and some needs that we have over the next few weeks, and priorities that we are working on as we request to move to remote learning for our schools and students for this 2-week period of time. Those include understanding that we are having difficulties with ensuring that we can have enough substitutes for the number of teacher absences that are occurring in our district. And the graph that we showed you basically showed that as the number of absences has continued to increase, the percentage of subs that are available to cover those classes is decreasing. And we've had more subs pick up jobs, as Dr. Martin has indicated, but the percentage of subs available for the number of staff that are requiring subs is dropping. And that does not reflect all of the folks that necessarily are out in a building. That only reflects those who are the staff who require or are eligible to put in for a sub. There are other staff in buildings, which reduces the number of adults in the building. We also talked about the fact that we are working on, and you heard that proposal more today, around how we're going to increase our staff capacity at the district level to support the county with contact tracing and case management. And we also talked about the fact that there is a lot of anxiety and concern with the numbers in the county, the movement on the county indicator from DHHS moving from yellow to orange. And while that is not directly impacting in terms of spread in our schools, that is not the concern that we have. We do know that the increase of cases in the community means there are increased cases in the schools, and that is causing some of these issues with the ability to contact trace, the ability to get subs, et cetera. And there is a lot of concern that, given that this increase has occurred after a holiday break, that we will see the same thing happen after this winter break and the holidays. And so taking that pause for 2 weeks really does put us in a position to work on these areas that we have talked about where we have some needs, and make sure that we are really doing everything possible to ensure that we begin the second semester with the plan that the board has approved. And that is the intent of requesting that the district return to remote for January 14th through 15th. I'm happy to answer any questions and would request the board's approval.
I will make a motion to approve the proposal to move remote instruction from January 4th to 15th in order to open this for discussion.
Second.
Got a motion from Ms. Mahaffey and a second from Mrs. Kushner to approve staff's recommendation and proposal to move to remote instruction from January 4th through the 15th. Is there any discussion? Mrs. Scott.
Thank you. Superintendent Moore, I appreciate that you are emphasizing the impact of the metrics, not necessarily with community spread in our schools, but the impact is still felt within our schools as unfortunately that is what we're facing as a community. And again, I would encourage everyone to continue to be as safe as possible. I just wanted to clarify that when we do return for second semester, 4th and 5th grade students would be in Plan A on the 20th?
That is correct. The board-approved plan for second semester at this time is Plan A for K-5, for pre-K-5, and K-12 regional programs, and it is the 3-week cohorts for grades 6 through 12 as what is currently allowed based on the governor's executive orders.
Thank you. And grades 4 and 5 right now are operating in the 3-week rotation.
That is correct. So when the return for second semester has grades 4 and 5 returning in Plan A, which is daily in-person instruction.
So that's going to be quite a break, of course, going from having the rotations and these teachers having fewer students in their classroom, and then having the 2 week of the holiday, or almost 2 week of the holiday, and then remote, and then full classrooms. I know there will be a lot of work being done, in the meantime, but is there any kind of indication of what types of supports would be available to assist with that transition? Because that'll be a pretty big change for everyone in grades 4 and 5.
So I believe that schools have been working on that transition with the expected date of return being January 4th. If this is approved this evening, then they will have a little more time to be prepared and get ready for that transition back. Generally speaking, if schools need assistance, they are reaching out to their area superintendents, or as we have principal meetings, we are providing them like these office hours with different departments to brainstorm and work with each other on best practices. I think that our area soups have a good handle on who needs help and what they need help with, but certainly I would say here that if there are schools that need some help with any of the logistics or planning for 4th and 5th grade to be fully back in person, that their principals and area superintendents are the best people to work with.
Okay, thank you for that. Thank you, Chair Sutton.
Okay. Mrs. Cash.
I'd just like to say, this is a hard vote for me. Although I do understand the intent, and I do respect the reasoning of our very wise staff. I have to say they're very wise on why we would propose a 2-week period to return after our holidays, to return to remote for the entire system. And I know this proposal does not indicate that we would do anything except come back in Plan A in K through 5, like we have talked about, and the other proposal that we've already voted on to be in cohorts in 6 through 12. I think the hardest thing for me to support this would be, which is something that I'm very concerned about, that I think we again are actually treating all our schools the same way. And I just remember when we went to our transition of B transition, we talked considerably about classes that would have clusters, or classes that would have certain things happen in them, or schools that might have secondary infection. We talked about, are we going to treat them the same and close everybody? Are we going to close that school? Are we going to close that classroom? And we were pretty well in agreement that we would not do that, that we would treat the class separately, we would treat the school separately. I do understand that this is different. This is saying that we are proposing a 2-week after the holidays with the possibility that there will be a spike again, but it just isn't giving me the hope that I want for our elementary schools to be back in full after, as Ms. Scott said, that's quite a break. And I'm concerned that we would not come back in full after that period of time, and I don't know that we would have accomplished anything. So that's probably the reason I can't support the proposal.
Thank you, Mrs. Cash. I appreciate that, and I think what I hear in your comments and sense in some of the emails is a similar concern. But I do think that this proposal, and Superintendent Moore can speak to this, but this is not an open-ended proposal. It is date certain and specific. We're talking January 4th through the 15th. So this is a proposal to pause for that 2-week period. Our plans for second semester are still intact. The board has made that decision, and at this point, we are still on schedule to move forward with those second semester plans. And at least in this time, I can honestly say, Superintendent Morgan can chime in. I don't think this 2-week pause has any impact on the plans to move forward with our second semester plans. But I'll let Superintendent Moore, you can speak on that.
This proposal does not make any implications about changing anything for our second semester plans. I recognize, Ms. Cash, that one of the concerns that has been expressed by both teachers, some principals, and we all know how difficult this is that as our kids are now back in person instruction in many cases, and how positive that has been in terms of an experience and a need, and we know that we have heard that is important for our children to be, that the importance of being in person. And we are desirous of that to the extent possible for all of our students. But we do want it to be safe. We want us to be able to sustain it. And there is some work that needs to be done, and as the proposal is also based on what has happened in the community in the last couple of weeks and that impact in our schools and the work that we want to do in between. So I just want to recognize and acknowledge what you're saying and how difficult this is, because we do know how excited both our teachers, our staff, and our families have been about being back in the classroom. I get a lot of those emails as well, and I know that this is very difficult. So.
I just thank you, Superintendent Moore. I appreciate you saying that and acknowledging that, and I know you do feel that. I do understand that. I want to clarify, first of all, pausing does not mean we are pausing doing anything. We are actually going to remote for 2 weeks. It's not pausing, I don't think, right? We're going to call it a pause, I guess.
We'll be in remote learning for those 2 weeks.
We'll be in remote learning. Okay, let's make that.
Be it a pause, be it a reset. We will be.
Okay, just to clarify that, because I'm not reacting to any one group of emails. I'm not. I don't look at this that way. I just know how I feel about the young children and the K-3 kids not being in school, and all kids not being in school. But it's. I don't know that we can that we can always treat all of our schools the same. So, anyhow, that's all I need to say.
No, and I hear you, and I think there are some, pain points, but I think the pressure points are felt across the district when we look at some of the absences and sub rates and that sort of thing. But again, Mrs. Mahaffey, and I got 2 other hands as well, so I get to you all. Ms. Mahaffey.
Thank you, Chair Sutton. Many of you know this is a decision that personally affects our family, and not that I only look at how it impacts our family, but all families that we're hearing from and those that we don't hear from, as well as our teachers. And having those changes for being in remote, going back, that's the flexibility that no one wants for their students, no one wants for their children, but in this pandemic, that's kind of the way that Plan B, or not a virtual academy, has been set up, knowing that whether it's an executive order or something else, we would be in that flux. And that's hard, and that's just really hard. And I've seen firsthand, and I've heard from many parents and teachers how children are doing in the classroom space. And I also recognize that being in that classroom space for many of our staff and teachers is difficult for them. But this is a decision being based on a district-wide staffing issue with filling substitutes. And in the work session, we heard from our student support services and Ms. Kelly Creech that we can add some staff to help with contact tracing so that families who are quarantining, staff members who are quarantining, we maybe can shorten that time period for them if they end up being negative. And hopefully we'll see some more ways that we can fill our substitute rates. And we've heard some decent proposals and ideas on how to reach out to those subs and get them a little more engaged. And substitute teaching is not easy in a regular year, right, Ms. Scott? Let alone in a pandemic. So this is a difficult decision. I don't think anyone sitting around here is taking this lightly, and those are the comments that I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mahaffey. Ms. Kushner.
Thank you, and I again acknowledge that this is a tough decision, but I also think in retrospect it's going to look like a wise decision, given the patterns we've seen in COVID-19 in our community, the spikes that have come after Labor Day, after Thanksgiving, when we gather. So I think this is going to give us time to have a winter break where we can rest and rejuvenate ourselves as a community, and then have this 2-week period of a quarantine-like work and learn from home buffer that is going to allow us to focus on second semester. I said this yesterday, and that remains my focus because I, like Ms. Carter and all of my colleagues, I want our high schools to be able to start in their hybrid for second semester. I don't want them to lose any more time of in-person instruction. So I'm looking at this buffer time as a way for us to get the contact tracing in place. I was glad to hear of the expansion of the staff that we're going to have to support our school communities in tracking and addressing COVID that might be in the community or in the school. I'm enthused. I want us to make sure that our staffing, our subs are bolstered so that we can respond to the needs of staffing at our school community. So I really want us to use these 2 weeks to do that important work in what might be a spike of COVID in our community. So I think it's going to look in mid-January as a good decision, as much as we can look into this crystal ball with this very unpredictable school year that we've had. But also to the community, you're reading your comments and know that we again have comments that are conflicting and broad-ranging. There are folks strongly supporting this. There are folks who want us to stay in remote the rest of the year, as well as folks who want us to be in Plan A K-12. So we have to, I think we're doing the best we can, following guidance from our superintendent's leadership team to make the best decision possible in a very difficult, lousy set of circumstances. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kushner, for acknowledging the wide array of opinions that we've seen on this issue as well. Ms. Carter.
All right, thank you. I guess I am really struggling because I guess especially after some things I heard yesterday in the work session, I just have a feeling that, and I have a fear of not coming back as we have planned to come back. It's already been put out there, and my gut is telling me this is a red flag. I struggle because the safety concerns, it depends on who you talk to. From the experts, and again, I go back to Governor Cooper and Dr. Cohen. Governor Cooper of our North Carolina has still said, as of right now, unless something's happened since we've been here, Plan A is fine. According to him and Dr. Cohen in North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, and if you follow what they have, which we have done, okay, and we are in compliance with their recommendations, or with what they say, their requirements that we must do, the safety. They have not deviated from their recommendations, despite or in spite of, whichever way you want to look at it, what's happening outside of our schools. So that's difficult. I think it would make this an easier decision if you had top state officials and state health officials saying this is so bad that we need to shut down. They're not saying that. And go along with that, the ABC Science Collaborative information, they do not tell us whether or not to shut down or not, but they are also saying how great of a job Wake County is doing. Again, those are based on their 12 principles and what they have seen needs to be put in place to be safe. Safe for students, safe for staff members. The reality is staff in our schools are now frontline workers. That is the new reality. That's it. So if you're waiting for the day where it's going to be the normal quote of safe to go back into the school, I don't know if we can't ever predict when that date will be. And that is my concern, because I am concerned about the safety of our students and staff. I worked in it until November 30th. I've been in there. I continue to go back. I will show up at your school. I love going into the schools. I get it. I understand it. I respect everyone that is showing up and doing everything they can. And I am still stuck with, then you have over here a group saying something different. Health professionals. And it's very mixed. There is nothing set. Yes, no, maybe. I feel like it's where we're at. And it's a very difficult situation. We have, I feel like, entered it, MOA with the ABC Science Collaborative. I think that was a strong statement of where we felt like we would get some of our leadership from as far as health guidance and recommendations and safety. So that's the biggest thing for me, because I want it to be safe. It must be safe, but we also need to have a new reality when you are now a frontline worker, what safety now means. And I don't know how to say that other than to say it like that. I think it's very difficult, because I don't think, I think it's very tough. We're getting mixed signals about what we need to do. We're doing what the state says we need to do. We're doing what the ABC Science Collaborative says we need to do. And it's tough. Everything has changed overnight, and what is a new expectation for our staff and students. And I don't downplay it at all. I just think it's very confusing to the community members, to families, to everyone, when you have multiple different quote-unquote health expert people telling you this and that. So that is very difficult and has me very unsure about what to do and not fully supporting this, because to me, North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, check. ABC Science Collaborative, check. We're good with those. Where there is some question is CDC, but then there's question with that too. So again, I'm like, that's really where I'm at. And then I also, and thank you, I think I said it, but in case I didn't, everyone that's showing up, I do care about your safety. I understand it. I understand, but I think it's a new reality of how we define and what we can do to reassure people and understand that there is a new reality now for being a frontline worker. Something I wanted to point out to Dr. Benjamin when he was Was it just yesterday? Yes, it was just yesterday. Okay. When he was here, finally, I'm like, well, it seems longer ago. And he discussed that there are some communities that have school systems that have remained in person despite of community rates being 2- and 3-fold what we have right here in Wake County. So I want to point that out. That's another, just something else to throw in the mix that makes it very difficult because that's conflicting from other people and what their positions may be. And I go back to, I am concerned this will just delay it 2 weeks, the reality of 2 weeks. Because we do not control, cannot control what staff members do on their time off and what students and families are going to do on their time off. So let's just say they decide they want to extend their vacation by 2 weeks because they can work remotely. They can go to school remotely. Not everyone can work remotely, but the vast majority, it sounds like, will be able to. And so then I look at, so what are we going to, are we just delaying the issue that possibly could occur if we came back January 4th? I'm just laying out all my struggles, just going to say it. And I go back to the kids and just particularly, I mean, all kids. One, just want to say every student I'm worried about because I've heard just the transformation in kids with this just coming into the building and what it has done for them. And I'm also particularly worried about the students that may not have the resources to have any support during those 2 weeks. And what are, again, what's going to happen during those 2 weeks? What is the reality for them those 2 weeks? And is this in their best interest? So those are my, thank you for listening, but that is where I'm at because I feel like that is the big picture and the reality and trying to be sure that this, in January we're not hit up with, well, let's just change semester 2. I want to make it loud and clear. I'm very upset by that notion. I think we worked hard to get here, and we must do what we can to keep students in person and follow the safety measures that we have already put in place, and look at how we're going to address the sub issue. And if it is so widespread now that we cannot operate, that is one thing. But if it's where we can handle it by closing certain different schools, that's another issue. And making sure during this break we're doing everything we can to get the subs, get the volunteers, do whatever you need to do to make sure this doesn't happen again.
So thank you, Ms. Carter, for laying out those things, and I appreciate that. And you said that if we can't get the subs, that's one thing. That is the thing, and that is what it's about. This is about, this is not a runway or on-ramp to make another decision in 2 weeks to not return. And so I don't want to feed a false narrative that this is about health and safety. Obviously, that has some impact on it, but this decision is grounded in our ability to operate efficiently and effectively and make sure that there are teachers and subs, adults in the building, and not one that's about, I heard you mention health and safety several times, but it's been pretty clear, I think Superintendent Moore and staff have made it pretty clear that this is about our ability to safely and efficiently operate schools by having the appropriate staff in the building. And I didn't really hear you mention that as part of your comments there until the end, that that's one thing. That is the thing. So I don't want to feed a false narrative that this is about something else. This is really grounded in our ability to operate schools efficiently. Dr. Martin.
Thank you. I'd like to first state that I think we need to acknowledge that we should not be here. We should not be where we are today. As a community, we needed to take this more seriously, and we as a big we, right? As a community, we needed to take this virus more seriously 6-8 months ago. We didn't. That gets us where we are. There are national issues, there are state issues, there are local issues. Even with respect to the staffing issue, you know, if you look at many labor sectors, whether it's manufacturing to just about anything else, you know, to operate requires more staff. We have not had an active program to increase staff. I mean, that's getting the real local, our work, right? Whether it's a volunteer corps, whether it's some other situation. We knew this was going to come, and I will, you know, express frustration at the staff level because I think there's more we could have done to stand up issues. We haven't. We are where we are, both in terms of the health metrics and in terms of the staff metrics. So we have to make decisions now based on where we are. We can't just wish we would have made different decisions some time ago. So here we are. I think it's also important for us to recognize that there are not mixed recommendations. There's a lot of people who talk about mixed recommendations. There's a lot of people, you know, who like to talk about listen to scientists, and then they pick out one phrase from some report. And I'll tell you how scientists work, because I am one. Scientists look at all data, right? Not just one piece, here, there. You have to look at the whole picture. And in fact, the scientific data is very clear. The article that Dr. Benjamin sent around to us from the CDC makes it very clear, a very important statement. Schools should be the last settings to close after all other mitigation strategies have been employed and the first to reopen. What we're looking at, unfortunately, is we're having to make a school-based decision for a situation where we have not, as a community, had all other mitigation measures employed. And so as a school system, we're having to make decisions, you know, that we shouldn't be having to make. We have not, as a community, prioritized schools over other venues, which is the clear recommendation, that is the clear scientific recommendation. The other absolutely clear scientific recommendation is that all 3 W's, however you want to describe it, be put into place. We need to wear masks. We need to wash surfaces, hands, you name it, and we need to wait appropriate distances apart. And those distances are very clear. The CDC says greater than 6 feet. The World Health Organization says greater than 1 meter for outdoors and even larger spaces for indoors. The 3 W's and all other mitigation strategies are the clear, not mixed, they are the clear scientific recommendation. We have done some of those well. We have not done all of those well. I'm not going to make a motion today about making sure we have all 3 W's for when we return. I want to return. I want to maximize our long-term success. And I happen to believe that the scientific recommendations are those that we should follow. That we need to have the community take all other mitigation measures, and that we follow all 3 W's. I seriously would like to recommend that staff look at mechanisms to make sure that we have appropriate distancing when we return. I think it's also important to note that the governor's conditions allow for Plan A, but the governor's recommendations do not make a recommendation for Plan A. The governor's recommendations make it clear that every school district needs to look at their circumstances and make a decision based on their circumstances. There is not a one-size-fits-all recommendation, and to say that the North Carolina Health Department is recommending Plan A is simply not correct. They allow Plan A. It is not recommended. What's recommended is to look at your setting and see what best fits. I think it's also critical that we pay attention to health issues, particularly for those who have low access to health care. I had a conversation this afternoon with the leader in Southeast Raleigh who very clearly recommends that we take a pause, a quarantine-like pause, right? This is not pausing in-person instruction. This is a quarantine-like pause to make sure that when we come back from the holiday break, that we've got those scientifically sound things in place. I mean, the issue is, there's a lot of people who have tried to downplay, oh, there's not many kids who are dying. That is true. But if you're a low-income individual or an individual who doesn't have access to health care, your risk is really, really high, both from a health perspective and a financial perspective. We have to make sure that we take that kind of a situation into account. If we had universal access to health care, we'd be having a different story right now. We wouldn't actually, I don't believe that the pandemic would be where it is, but we have a lot of people who don't have access to health care. And what I'm hearing from the communities who have the least access to health care, these communities are asking us, please, we're seeing things spiraling, take this quarantine-like pause. And again, the why? The why is to maximize success. We want to be open. We need to make sure that we're being careful in the short term so that we can have success for the long term. The 2-week quarantine-like pause, the purpose of it is so that we can be successful for the long term, to maximize the chance that we will be successful for our high schoolers coming back, for everybody to come back as safely as possible. Will it be a hard 2-week decision? Yes. If we would have taken, as a community, if we would have taken harder measures early on, we would not be where we are today. We have a chance to do this again, and I just think it's the wise strategy to take these 2 weeks, and then we need to return with the scientifically sound guidelines. So I will actually be voting in favor of this quarantine-like pause. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. Ms. Johnson-Hosmer.
Thank you very much. Excuse me. I mean, like so many of my colleagues have said, and Ms. Carter, I could feel all of your emotions because every decision feels like this, right? It feels like a yes, no, or maybe when we have so many divergent opinions from our school community, which is, for all of us, our primary constituents when we're thinking about any decision, is all of our stakeholders and what they're saying to us. And just the mere fact that clearly we're never all on the same page, but to be this divergent certainly makes it very difficult for those of us who want to be responsive to all of our constituents all the time. And this is certainly one of these places where there's not a decision in 2020 where we've been able to do that. And I certainly do hope that we will get to a place in 2021 where we can feel like that we are making decisions that aren't so far apart from what our stakeholders are asking us for, that we find a creative solution. And to this point, we haven't done that. And, I couldn't echo more that for me, as you all heard me say last night, I desperately need and want our kids back in school. Seeing them physically and what it's meant for them to be back in person has meant a lot. And also seeing those who aren't back in person, the difficulty and the challenges it's been for them. However, I also think it's important to note for me, and I often think about kind of what people are asking us for, and ultimately, what does this mean for educational outcomes? As someone who spends my time talking a lot about the emotional and mental well-being of our folks, which is certainly extremely important to me, we are in the business of education. And when I think about Leandro and how I thought 2020 we would be spending our time talking about how we would actually effectively implement Leandro. And I had a whole lot of sleeplessness last night thinking about what does that mean if I came into 2020 believing that that's my priority, is how do we ensure that every single student has access to a high quality education, and how do we use the components of Leandro to make that happen? And here we sit at the end of the year, not even remotely able to talk about what that means to bring all of our students a quality education. And so, while the decision is, again, very difficult and very emotional, and lots of things that we're reading and receiving that could have us vote either way and feel like we're meeting the needs of our constituents to some degree. But ultimately for me, the uninsured and the underinsured are absolutely always the most impacted by our decision making. And we've said this from the beginning. COVID has highlighted that and illustrated it for anyone who didn't believe it. And so again, when I think about Leandro, to me, it certainly says if I am sending our students to a school building where they don't have adequate number of staff to provide the best quality education while they're in those buildings, then what's the screening in my head, right? Is that the best decision to make if ultimately it's about the outcome of the whole student? Or do we take a quarantine pause and let them learn from home? That still didn't help me, just for the record, to your point, Ms. Carter. I still didn't feel like I had a sound decision on this. And ultimately, as you all know, that when I'm very transparent. I mean, I really have had to lean into my faith this entire year around COVID and let it be the guiding light for me. And ultimately, because I think about all of the inequities that we've seen, sending our young people, especially our most vulnerable, back into a building without educators or enough educators, or sending them into the building with educators who are trying to pull double and triple duty, doesn't feel right for the students, the teachers, or the parents who are on the receiving end of their students getting the best that a teacher can give when they're managing the multitude that they would be managing without having an adequately staffed building. We've talked about how we should have made some different decisions early on, so we're not here. But we are also here because we are just now really peeling back the layers of what can we do within the confines that currently exist. And for me, the ultimate decision for me that I'll make this evening is truly twofold. One, I don't think, based on what we've heard from staff, that our schools will be adequately staffed to provide the quality education to all students who are in person. Now, do I believe students will be happy just to be there without a quality education? Absolutely, I do. But that's, I think it's important that you know that that's why I'm making the decision, is really running it through this whole screening tool in my own head and charting it out on paper. And the other piece of it is that for me, both of these go hand in hand, is I don't know that I'd be making this decision if we were adding a 2-week quarantine in the midst of today. Not if this was November 10th, I wouldn't be voting to do this on November 25th. Because for me, thinking about the fact that we're already going to be out on holiday break makes it a little easier in my head, especially for our littles, because they're the ones back in school who have the less likely sense of time, which, again, you know, Ms. Carter, we also are losing sense of time these days, but they don't. And so I will say, for me, that was the final thing for me, is to be able to say, yes, I can be okay voting for the 2-week quarantine after the winter break, because it's a move, it flows right in from them having been out and not stopping and starting a break without some continuity. Again, not an easy decision, but I think I owe it to my colleagues and to our families as to why I'll be voting that way this evening. It certainly does, as Chair Sutton said, boil down to the clarity around capacity in the building and the fact that we will already be on a break. The last thing that I'll say is a plea that this is not an extended vacation. That we are truly asking people, we are begging people, and so is our government, follow the 3 W's. If you're going to be around people during the holidays, then we are begging you to count back on your own calendar from the moment that you're seeing people, that you have adequately, and this is for every single stakeholder who will step foot in our building after January 15th, we're begging you to be considerate of the people around you, and to recognize that if not today caring about our neighbors and loving thy neighbors as we love ourselves, I don't know when we could do this as a community. And so that's ultimately what I implore our community to do, regardless of what your faith or principles are. I think most people believe in human kindness to their neighbors, and I'm asking that this is the way that you can do that. And that's for people who have kids in our schools and people who don't. Because there's also a place of community accountability for our friends, even if we don't have kids in school, to really call us into question. And the last piece is, I certainly also agree that it's a narrative shift for all of us, but it's a narrative shift we're going to start to have, is that everyone in our buildings who touch our students' lives they are frontline workers. They are first responders. They always have been, and we haven't really framed it that way during this time. And that's on us, right? And not us, but the larger education community for not noting this earlier. But now that we have the vaccine here, you can hear us across the country acknowledging that our educators have always been frontline workers. They've always been first responders. And I certainly hope after this moment that this country will see fit to pay them like we pay our physicians, because they don't even get paid like nurses, that we will note that we treat them and pay them and respond to them as the respect that they deserve as first responders, and quite frankly, the front line for those of us who have students in our community. And so, again, to echo my colleagues' sentiments, this is certainly not the moment that any of us want to be in, and I felt compelled to share with our public and our constituents of how I've landed here, given the difficulty of where we are in this moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson-Hostler. Mr. Haggerty.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I have some very specific, direct questions, but especially after hearing some of the comments of fellow board members, I mean, I just have to say and comment that, you know, this is tough work where there is, no matter what option we pick, there's no good option. There are problems with all of the options. And I don't know if people really recognize and appreciate that based on the messages that we get in the community, through our email, through social media, and all of the communications. None of these options are great. They all have problems. And you know, we sit here and we get message after message, heartfelt message saying, you know what, you don't listen and you don't care. And the same people, I mean, the people that are arguing that students need to go back to full-time instruction right now, regardless of what the governor or the health department say we don't listen and we don't care. And, you know, the people that say we need to shut down all of the schools until the vaccine has been distributed and proven successful, say we don't listen and we don't care. I don't believe there's anyone sitting around this table who doesn't listen and who doesn't, and anyone who doesn't care. You know, I have to go to sleep each night thinking about all of these cases. I have to think about the teachers that contact us who seem to have very legitimate health conditions, but who were denied accommodations and had to choose between the job they love and risking their health or their family's health because their job is considered essential, can't be replicated, you know, virtually. I mean, my own children have had beloved teachers leave the profession. I have friends who are teachers who've had this happen. At the same time, you know, we have to understand the impact this has on the rest of the community. I have a family member who is a single mother who lost her job the week of Thanksgiving because her employer said that she abandoned her job because she was spending so much time, couldn't arrange childcare, having to stay home with her kids for remote learning. Now, that's not in Wake County. It's in another district, another jurisdiction. But that's real. So we can't generalize and say, you know what, we need to keep the kids out of school because people that have low income, you know, they're afraid of coronavirus. Of course they are. Most people have concerns and health concerns. But these decisions have impacts beyond just that. And when people do lose jobs, when they lose access to income, to health care, when they don't have the child care that's available, those are real-world impacts of our decisions, and wishing for universal health care is not going to help them. So, I understand and I appreciate that these decisions are going to have lasting ramifications. And we haven't even talked about the students in terms of the problems. I know, Mr. Sutton, you've addressed this in some presentations in the community, but how the students are doing with remote learning. We've been celebrating successes, but we have to acknowledge the challenges, and we have to acknowledge where we have students who aren't participating. Ms. Carter, you brought up lack of engagement. We have students, especially at-risk students, whose participation is drying up. We have more students across the board whose grades are worse. And we have to address all of these things. At the same time, we don't want to be reckless and put people's lives and health in jeopardy. So I care, and I know that's not going to satisfy the people that strongly believe there's one solution, one perfect solution, and that we're all a bunch of dummies because we're not doing what they want. But we're listening. We're listening to a lot of people. And I think everyone around here cares about the results of our actions. So to switch topics, I do want to say, we've talked about a lot of the public safety issues, but Mr. Sutton, you've addressed that this specific decision is based around a lot of staffing issues. And I want to say that since our last meeting yesterday, going out and talking to people in the community, I've talked to a lot of employers and managers and government offices, and they are experiencing similar problems. We have a number of employers in our community in Wake County. We have a number of, one of our biggest employers is our city and county and state government administrations that are taking responsible precautions in the workplace. They're doing everything they can, following the protocols to take care of workers, and they're experiencing severe labor shortages because of the quarantines that are necessary, not because these other employees in other areas and other sectors are contracting the disease at work, but because they're contracting it in the community, or a spouse might have been exposed to it in the community, but the entire household has to quarantine. These quarantines, these things that we are doing to keep everyone safe, are having long impacts. So this isn't something just unique to schools, and it is something, and I think if you talk to folks in the community, you'll see this is something a lot of people are struggling with. How to stay operational when so many people are unavailable for work right now, just experiencing the surge that we've seen since Thanksgiving. So a lot of parents, a lot of families, a lot of teachers have, since our meeting yesterday, brought a lot of questions. And just before we vote, I wanted to ask Superintendent Moore if I could just ask you these simple, direct questions and get your response to it. Because hopefully, where it seems that there are some misunderstandings or desiring for better understanding about your recommendation, I'm hoping this will help provide some comfort or at least some understanding of it. So the first thing is about the teacher vacancies. There are several people that are wondering, we've talked about we have so many more daily absences now than we did in October. The difference, under 200 to now close to 500. But we're posting a limited number of COVID cases in the schools. So can you tell us what is driving these absences?
So I'll start and let Dr. Matillo, if he is online, respond. But the absences that we are seeing in schools right now are related to what it could be someone who comes in and is positive, but if there are any exposures in the school, then those exposures, the county will contact them, do the contact tracing, and will ask people to quarantine as well due to exposures. And one of the things that's very difficult in classrooms is the requirements around what an exposure is. It can be taking your masks off, but it can also be being more than 6 feet, closer than 6 feet of distance to someone for a cumulative 15 minutes during the course of the day. And that has caused a lot more folks to have to quarantine than otherwise because of that cumulative nature of 15 minutes. And I don't know if Dr. Matillo has any more specifics around what we're seeing in the numbers and the reason, the codes.
Yeah, and I don't have the absence codes available, but I think it's also a combination of a couple factors. First of all, we don't have substantially increased absences as compared to last year, let's say, because we do have lots of teachers who are virtual academy or are remote and are able to tell. So it is a combination of that substitute availability along with the teacher absences. But I think one of the struggles schools come up with is, when you have increased cases within the community, folks do get exposed or potentially exposed at greater rate. So we have teachers who are being cautious, and that's a great thing. But if folks feel like they've been exposed or could have been exposed, they are staying home, they are quarantining. And in previous years, a teacher may be absent for a day or two and can come back, but now we're talking absences that extend, well beyond that, 10 days and sometimes more if you have family members. So I think that does play a role in the absences that we're seeing.
Okay, thank you. Superintendent Moore, why did staff come up with this particular proposal rather than just closing schools when vacancies were too high to offer classes? Why are you proposing a district-wide quarantine rather than just going school by school, day by day?
Two thoughts there. The first one is it varies from school to school on any given day. It's not always in the same area. It's not always the same schools. And sometimes you don't know until the morning of. And then you're in it for several days. But I think the second piece of this is really the notion of taking a couple of weeks after the winter break and the anxiety that we're seeing in the community around what's happened with moving from yellow to orange and the numbers increasing, and that having an impact in the schools. And as one of the other board members stating, the pausing after the winter break, providing the time to see what happens with those numbers and those cases going higher. And if they, because all of the physicians that we're talking to, including the folks from the ABC Science Collaborative, believe those numbers will continue to climb. And what that impact will be on us so that we have time to prepare as well. We're already having those issues now. We have some steps in mind that we are going to be taking and working on during this time so that when we are back for second semester, as we see what's happened, that we're ready to go. And we may still have some issues with staffing after we come back, but we need better options to deal with it. And we might be able to, right now we've had some schools and grade levels that have closed and shut down around the district. And we also didn't have a mechanism for really understanding what all of that was, which started a week ago. We explained that yesterday, and asking our principals to report on a regular basis who the teacher absences were in the building and how staff were having to be reassigned from duties in order to do that coverage. Understanding that and tracking that's going to be very helpful as well.
And so that goes to my next question, and I think it was a concern some other board members raised about how going remote for these 2 weeks will allow us to address those problems, or does it just push them down the road?
Yeah.
What do you think you'll be able to accomplish a lot in that time?
Well, there are certainly plans to do the work to mitigate and improve. Like we contacted all of our subs, if I'm not mistaken, Dr. Matillo, at the beginning of the school year, and a large number, 1,400 to 1,500, indicated that they would be comfortable subbing, but that number is not actually being realized in terms of the numbers that are picking up jobs. So we've got to reach back out again to understand what that landscape is and what it takes. There may be a compensation issue that's a part of that. They may come back to the board as early as January 5th. So there are some actions that will be taken, as well as looking at, and this came from a recommendation from Dr. Cash yesterday and some words that she said, how we might leverage other folks that are willing to come in and support in schools with needs, and how we might mesh a desire to help in the community with needs in our schools. The work around contact tracing to try to improve the requirements and the case management and investigation around quarantines will be helpful as well. And the strategy that I didn't mention earlier that we're also working on with local health officials in the state around having an opportunity for all of our staff to test right before coming back in, and sort of level setting that way as we come back in. So those are things that we are working on during this period as well.
And we touched on this a little bit yesterday, but I've gotten more questions on it. Is it your intent, or will the district provide any direction about allowing staff to work remotely during this time, or will they still be expected to come into the building if they're expected to come in now?
Once we determine this evening where we land, if we land with pausing for those 2 weeks and going back to remote from the 4th to the 15th, in order for this semi-quarantine strategy to be effective, we must allow and request that our staff also telework in order to accomplish limiting the number of people in buildings.
Thank you. Just two more questions, and this goes to a point that I made earlier, and I know that it was included in Chairman Sutton's presentation, and that is with the challenges that the district is seeing with remote learning. Can you tell us what is being done to improve remote learning as we go into the next calendar year and second semester?
Remote. So I think, Alicia Miller talked to some of this earlier, but, and I'll see if Drew is on and can recap some of that in terms of how we're getting feedback to understand what the best practices are and how to move forward. Drew, are you on?
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Moore, and thank you for the question, Mr. Haggerty. This is a conversation, as you might imagine, and there are structures that face and we'll be moving forward to continue to identify. And we talked about this yesterday, just from a standpoint of school improvement and that structure and framework. I believe it was Dr. Martin that asked the question, in how we identify best practices that are occurring, make adjustments, within schools, but also across schools as we identify what's working. And so, Mr. Haggerty, that will include things like focus groups, taking a look at both school level and district level data, getting feedback from teachers and staff as to what seems to be working and some of the areas where we're having some challenges, and working hard to make adjustments, not just in the short term, but I think as we referenced yesterday, also in the longer term as well, to ensure that our students are going to be as positioned as well as they possibly can going in even to the 21-22 school year in terms of the academic skill set that they have. So I think it's important to point out that at no point are we satisfied with the status quo. And as hard as our teachers are working and our schools are working every day, I think we all simultaneously acknowledge and recognize that there's always going to be room for improvement as long as we're working in these circumstances. And so I think it's an iterative process. It's not one that has a clear starting point.
Well, I appreciate that, Mr. Cook, and I really appreciate the strides you all have been able to do since the spring, delivering education from where we were when this started to where we are now. But I also think that opportunities to continually remind and update and inform people about the work that you're doing, the improvements you're making, and soliciting their feedback. The idea of focus groups, surveys for staff, for parents and families in particular, I think will do a lot as we ask families to return to remote learning, even for this two-week period. And then finally, Superintendent Moore, just the last question. You mentioned it briefly in your remarks, but I want to go back to be clear because we're hearing a lot of people cite the recommendations of the ABC Collaborative. Did the ABC Collaborative or any of our health experts give us any recommendations or advice about surges or spikes following the holidays?
Well, I think that no recommendations, but in conversations as we review data, because they don't give recommendations, as review data, in talking to folks at the state level and within the ABC Science Collaborative, the narrative and the conversation is that these numbers will continue to go up, that we can expect to see that. And so we remain cautious, but optimistic at the same time that this will help us to begin the second semester as we have adopted by the board and communicated to our families.
Thank you. I appreciate all of your answers and your candor, and also want to just thank the board members for indulging me. I know that I took some time there, but I had some questions. I needed some answers, so thank you all.
So I'm going to have to give everybody up. Go ahead, Ms. Cash.
I know, I'm sorry. I went at the beginning, so I've been listening really hard to all my colleagues, and they've brought up a lot of good things. So I'm still struggling with this vote. So I'm going to ask a couple more questions, and I'm sorry, I took another time. But again, I talked a little bit about, and thank you, Mr. Haggerty, you answered a lot of the questions that I had, and I appreciate you going in that format. But if we do take the 2-week break, I still want to understand, is there a mechanism in the school system to look at schools individually at some point when we come back? I still think we're never going to be to the point where we might be able to keep all of our schools open all the time. And again, that's the concern that I'm bringing tonight.
And I'm going to guess that you're speaking not from the point of view of secondary spread or transmission or clusters, for which we do have the outline of a framework based on our couple.
Right, it's from
you're talking about
staffing.
from the operational sort of logistic pieces. That,
yes, ma'am.
Right. I think that's an ask that you're making, and that we owe you and the rest of the board a response to that ask. So we need some time to work on that. You know, we did not anticipate that we would have this issue given the responses we got from subs and where we thought we were at the beginning of the school year. So we're adjusting as well, but I'm going to look at that as an ask and bring you a response.
Okay, that helps a lot. That's probably my biggest concern after the break, is how we move back into our schools.
And Ms. Cash, is it okay if I ask a question to clarify for that? So you're saying if a school not related to a cluster, which is an official term, there's criteria that has to be met for a school to be deemed a cluster, and then that's followed up, that then is taken over by the Department of Health and Human Services. That's correct?
Right. And we are already doing that, but it's become it's more of a one-off right now. So. Because
those procedures are outlined pretty in the right toolkit and so forth. But you're talking about if, say, elementary school B, not a cluster, but just because of the number of staff who are perhaps quarantined, there are 30 people out, we don't have enough subs, we're looking at an entire office staff that's out, or for whatever reason, but all unrelated, that there would be a separate process to determine whether or not they...
I'm thinking, yes, exactly,
close.
but I'm thinking that during the 2 weeks we do all the things that you have said during that reset, and then we come back, but we still have some schools that are struggling, I don't want to close the entire system down. That's so, I mean, I would during those 2 weeks, I'd be more accepting of those if I knew that there were all kinds of things that were going to happen. But when we came back, if some things didn't work in some schools, we could still open those that it did.
I understand what you're asking, and it is certainly our goal for this not to be a system-wide in and out. The solution has to be more focused as we move forward. Yes.
Okay. Thank you for that, Ms. Cash. So So then just to sort of, call for the board at this point, and I want to echo the sentiments of all board members. I don't believe that, as Mr. Hager said, that there is a board member here that does not care or that hasn't listened. I don't think that there's a board member here that doesn't want to see a return to face-to-face instruction. And for that to happen as soon as we can safely and possibly do that safely and in an operational efficient manner. And I don't think that there's a board member here that doesn't feel like schools are among the safest. Some may differ or feel like they are the safest, but I think most board members feel like schools are among the safest place to be. So I don't think that any of those things are an issue. And so again, I think that this vote is really about, or the proposal at least, is about being our ability to operate our schools, not just safely, but efficiently, and in a way that ensures we've got adult coverage in the building. So with that, we have a motion and a second to accept the proposal to move to remote instruction from January 4th through the 15th. Since I've heard different board members indicate where they may or may not support this, I'm going to ask for a roll call vote instead of a voice vote, so that we are able to accurately reflect the position of each board member. So I'm going to start with Vice Chair Mahaffey.
Aye.
Dr. Martin.
Aye.
Mrs. Scott.
Aye.
Mrs. Kushner.
Aye.
Ms. Johnson-Hostler.
Aye.
Mrs. Cash. Mrs. Carter.
Aye.
Mr. Hagerty. I vote aye as well, and so that's 9-0 unanimous support for the proposal to move to remote instruction from January 4th to January 15th. Thank you for that. At this time, I'd like to entertain a motion to go into closed session for the items listed.
Chair Sutton, I make a motion that we go into closed session to consider confidential personnel information under GS 143-31811A1, A3, and A6, to consider confidential personnel information protected under GS 143-318.11A1, A3, and A16, Watkins versus Wake County Board of Education, IC file number 20-009152, and Harris versus Wake County Board of Education, IC file number 19-004267, and to consult with the Board of Education attorney and preserve attorney-client privilege as provided in GS 143-11A3 due to current litigation LP&L versus Wake County Board of Education et al., U.S. District Court, Eastern District of NC 520 CV 481-BO and VM by and through her parents AM and MM versus Wake County Board of Education 20 EDC 04287, and to consult with the Board of Education attorney and preserve attorney-client privilege as provided in GS 143-318.11A3.
Second.
Got a motion by Ms. Mahaffey, second by Ms. Johnson-Hostler, to go into closed session for the items just stated and listed on tonight's agenda. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor show by sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Ayes have it. We now stand in closed session. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in and your attention and sharing with us this evening. Appreciate it, and have a good night.